Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Again, in this chapter, Solomon is making some observations, again, concerning life lived apart from God. Read the first 6 verses. So I returned and considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun. And behold, the tears of such as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. And on the side of their oppressors there was power, but they had no comforter. Wherefore I praised the dead which are already dead more than the living, which are yet alive. In other words, better off to be dead than alive. Yea, better is he than both they which hath not yet been, who hath not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Again I considered all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. The fool foldeth his hands together, and eateth his own flesh. Better is a handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. Again, in the first 3 verses, Solomon observes that life is oppressive, and that's just a fact. In a fallen world, that is so. And he would go to places where you would expect to find judgment, and there was none, and such and such. Life is unfair. And it's very easy for the person who lives apart from God to get caught in that trap. Life is unfair. Life is oppressive. Then in verse 4, he considers another trap. He says, again, I considered. So he's bringing something else to our attention. And he mentions the individual who works a legitimate job, has a legitimate career, and he's successful, he makes a living, but he's envied by somewhere along the line. Someone is going to envy him. And again, that's what happens when a person lives apart from God. They envy others. So again, it's one of the traps that people fall into, living life apart from God. And then he moves on in verse 5, and he speaks he observes laziness. Again, he's observed a right work, someone who works, but then they're envy. And then he goes to the other extreme, laziness. There's work, there's laziness. He says in verse 5, the fool, that's how this individual's identified, foldeth his hands together, and eateth his own flesh. The fool foldeth his hands together. And as we began to see last week, that phrase, foldeth his hands together, is a term for sloth, a term for laziness. We see that in Proverbs 6, verses 10 and 11. We see it again in Proverbs 24, verses 33 and 34, a little folding of the hands. So Solomon has moved in observation from hard and honest work to laziness or sloth. He is moved from the diligent, those who put forth steady, earnest, energetic effort, to those who are negligent, to those who are sluggish. He says concerning this, he calls them a fool, and eateth his own flesh. They're cannibals to themselves. What that simply means is that they are self-destructive. They destroy themselves by their laziness, by their sloth. Solomon obviously was a man who sloth is something that bothered him, because he often spoke of the lazy. He often spoke of the slothful. He observed their lives. He made many observations. He made many comments about them. And we see this all through the book of Proverbs. But the first thing he says here is he's eateth his own flesh. Again, he's destructive to himself. He's destructive to himself. This person may also be the same one who envies the one who does a legitimate work. He envies what he has. Not willing to put forth the work, but he envies what he has. So we'll observe some of Solomon's statements concerning the slothful. In Proverbs 10, verse 26, again, this is a trap, laziness, that a person who lives apart from God can, doesn't mean they all do, can fall into. He says in Proverbs 10:26, has vinegar to the teeth, and as smoke to the eyes. Both are irritants. Vinegar and smoke. They're irritants. So is the sluggard to them that send him. The sluggard is an irritant to the person who sends him forth to do a job. He is a vexation. He's an annoyance. He's an irritation to their employers. The one who employs a sluggard is going to find this individual is annoying. This individual is an irritation. Anyone who has to depend upon the sluggard will find him to be an irritant, an annoyance. Notice in Proverbs 12, verse 24, he states a fact here. The hand of the diligent shall bear rule. That is, he may find himself in a position of authority. But the slothful shall be under tribute. This teaches that laziness, idleness, unceasing inactivity, and apathy, the two go hand in hand, laziness and apathy, is enslaving. It causes one to be under tribute. it brings one to bondage. Their own laziness is, again, a destructive force in their life. In Proverbs 13 and verse 4, the soul of the sluggard desireth. That's true of all of mankind. The soul desires. We desire. We desire material things. It's no different with the sluggard. They have desires also of material possessions, and hath nothing. The reason they don't have is because they're sluggard. But the soul of the diligent, two opposites here, the soul of the sluggard, the soul of the diligent, shall be made fat, or he will have an abundance. The sluggard is full of wishes, full of desires. They wish and they desire personal gain, but they have nothing because they're not willing to put forth the effort. They want what diligence brings about without the diligence. It's Proverbs 15, verse 19. Notice as we turn there. The way of the slothful man. He has a way. Everybody has a way about them. And so it is with the slothful. The way of the slothful man is a hedge of thorns. But the way of the righteous is made plain. There is a contrast between the righteous and the slothful. So that says something about the character of the slothful. But what we want to bring out is the way of the slothful man is as an hedge of thorns. That speaks of difficulty. His slothfulness brings difficulties into his life that he may not have if he just worked. It speaks of pain. There's a hedge of thorns. Thorns are painful. But overall it speaks of entrapment. A hedge of thorns. No matter where they go, there's these thorns. There's these difficulties. Well, nothing ever works out for me. Well, why is that? Why is that? What's the common denominator? The way of the slothful man is as a hedge of thorns. Then notice in Proverbs 18, verse 9. He that is slothful in his work. Okay, now here there are degrees of sloth. Here is a slothful man, but he does have some work. He also that is slothful in his work is brother, or is related to him that is a great waster. So here we see the slothful and the waster are much alike. The slothful man has very little heart for work, and whatever his work is, does the bare minimum. And therefore, important opportunities slip by, they're wasted, Opportunities are squandered, misspent, misused. He's a waster. He wastes the ability that God has given him. He wastes the mind that God has given him. Again, opportunities come along, but he either can't see them or refuses to see them, and they're wasted. It's wasted. Proverbs 19, verse 15. Slothfulness casteth into a deep sleep. Again, there's degrees. Slothfulness casteth into a deep sleep. And an idle soul shall suffer hunger. Now, the mindset oftentimes today is, well, this person may be lazy, but we can't let him hunger. But that's not the solution. That's not the solution to sloth. Sloth's the root problem. Hunger's not the root problem. Casteth into a deep sleep. Again, that slothful attitude causes one to go into a deep sleep. Energy creates energy. You do nothing, you fall into a cycle. You fall into a deep sleep. So a slothful disposition. What he's saying here, slothfulness casteth into a deep sleep. A slothful disposition stupefies, causes a deeper sleep. It makes one senseless, mindless of their affairs. You go into a deep sleep, you're senseless, you're mindless. And if they were cast, again, this slothful attitude, just as if they were cast into a deep sleep. Slothfulness makes poor. Proverbs 19, verse 24. A slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom, and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. Now that's lazy. Now that's lazy. But again, slothfulness grows on its victim. It grows. So much so that he doesn't even have heart to even do necessary things for himself. Will not even put his hand to his mouth. He would rather suffer the pangs of hunger than put forth exertion. It's no wonder Solomon says the fool. The fool. You would rather suffer than have the slightest bit of exertion. In Proverbs 20, verse 4, the sluggard will not plow by reason of the cold. He always has a reason. Therefore shall he beg in harvest and have nothing. The sluggard is always looking for reasons to put off work. It's a characteristic of the lazy. They look for reasons. If they can't find the reason, they'll create a reason. And they're always able to defend or justify their reason for not working. Well, it's cold outside. Well, tomorrow it's going to be warmer. Oh, it's going to be too hot. It's too dry. But tomorrow it's going to rain. I mean, there's always a reason not to work. That's a trap. The second line of that proverb, Proverbs 20, verse 4, reiterates the fact that slothfulness brings poverty. He shall beg and harvest and have nothing. And have nothing. Proverbs 20, verse 13. Love not sleep, lest thou come to poverty. Love not sleep. Doesn't say do not sleep. That's not what it says. Love not sleep. We all need sleep. People need different amounts of sleep. But we all need sleep. But that's not the issue here. The issue here is loving sleep. Loving sleep. Well, if I sleep, then I don't have to think. If I sleep, then I don't have to be aware of my problems. So I just sleep all day. Love not sleep. Because too much sleep brings poverty. Again, love not sleep has reference to the sleep of laziness. It's notice we'll go back in Proverbs 6. Proverbs 6, verse 4. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. And then verse 9 and 10. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber. Well, I'll just sleep a little longer. I'll just sleep a little longer. Well, a little longer. A little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come. Again, lest thou come to poverty. Love not sleep, lest thou come to poverty. Laziness has consequences. In Proverbs 21, verses 25 and 26, the desire of the slothful killeth him. He just desires to take it easy. And for his hands refuse to labor. His hands refuse to labor. He coveteth. Oh, he wants things. He coveteth greedily all the day long. But the righteous giveth and spareth not. There's the desire for food. There's the desire for raiment. But all of this is just a vexation to the slothful individual because of his refusal. His refusal to work. What is being said here is slothfulness brings misery. You see, a lot of people think, a lot of Christians think, that work is the fruit of the fall. And I don't believe anything could be further from the truth. Adam and Eve tended the garden before they sinned. Man is created to work. He's created to do something. And sinfulness or slothfulness brings misery. Proverbs 22, verse 13, the slothful man saith, there's a lion without. I shall be slain in the streets. This goes right along with the one who would not plow because it's cold outside. This individual, he says, there's a lion out there. I can't go to work. Now that lion could be real. It could be a figment of his imagination. But either way, what is being said is it doesn't take much. They're always looking for reasons. Always looking for reasons not to work. They can imagine difficulties that are not even there. And they're easily deterred. They're easily distracted from their work by any inconvenience. In Proverbs 24, we'll not turn there, but verses 30 through 34, Solomon describes a piece of property that he saw. And he says it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles covered the face thereof. You see a house, you look at the yard, weeds everywhere. Grass is tall. You can make several assumptions. Not all of them will be accurate. You can say, well, that person must be in bad health. They must not be able to mow their lawn. They must not be able to get out and pick weeds. The fence is falling down. Everything's falling apart. Everything's in a state of decay. They must not be able. And that may be so. Or it could be they're lazy. Or it could be they just don't care. But that's just what Solomon observed. And he came to the conclusion that it was the field of a slothful man. Again, slothfulness impoverishes. It causes poverty. So if we go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 4, again, I don't believe that Adam and Eve, before the fall, were victims of laziness. I don't believe they had a lazy trait about them. Not one. They lived in communion with God. And they were industrious. The fall occurs. And now man lives life apart from God. And apart from God, man can become very lazy. Very lazy. Now, in today's society, people don't like to make the distinction between inability and laziness. There's a difference. There's a difference. The Bible teaches that we have a responsibility to those who are not able. We have a responsibility. As individuals, we have a responsibility to them. The Old Testament teaches that. New Testament teaches it. We don't have a responsibility to the one who just refuses to work. Paul said if a man does not work, neither does he eat. Very, very simple. Nothing difficult about it. But we like to interject, well, what if, and you what if everything right away. That's a problem of living life apart from God. Even the solutions just cause more problems. They cause more problems. We, again, apart from God, there's all kinds of problems. Problem after problem, problem upon problem, difficulty upon difficulty. Man comes to the rescue. That's usually a dangerous thing, especially if he's living apart from God. And he comes up with a solution. The solution does not fix the problem, but worse than that, it creates 25 other problems. Well, we'll fix them. Now we'll work on these 25 problems. It doesn't fix any of them, but it creates a whole bunch more. And somebody has to be blamed, and man's not going to blame himself. So it's just a horrible cycle to live life apart from God. And the longer you live, the more you see this cycle. And nothing is going to be fixed until someone, and people are not honest enough, nor do they want to hear it, until someone says, this has to be stopped. The cycle has to be stopped. But people don't want that. So the problems just keep on. That's why things get worse and worse and worse. Man is his own worst enemy. And he lives his life apart from God. He just creates. He brings about more and more misery into his life. Well, Solomon moves on from laziness. In verse 6 he says, better is a handful, just a little bit, with quietness or peace, than both the hands full, overflowing with travail and vexation of spirit. So he moves on from lazy. He began with work, an honest living. He then moves on to laziness. And now he really moves to advise toward the answer to these problems. What is the answer to envy? What is the answer to the desire of the slothful? Well, he says here in verse 6, and we'll look at this next week, contentment. Contentment's the answer. Laws are not the answer. Something inward is the answer. And he goes on, he mentions this contentment. Let's look to the Lord. Heavenly Father, again,